Our guest today at the studio is Sunil Gangopadhyay. His myriad facets in creativity can't be sort of described in a few words because he's one of those literary figures after Tagore, I guess, who has been able to do whatever he has tried to do with some quality and excellence, whether it be poetry or fiction, and the short story type, the long epic novel type, the general novel type, the essay, the articles, the political pamphlets, even, strangely enough, like Tagore, in playmaking and playwriting. He is an activist of great caliber, and we have always wondered how he makes his time management possible. How do you, Shunilda, feel at 74 about the life you've had and lived? A long, dreary, exacting classroom period type? Or a smart, fast drinking binge that came and went before you knew? Were you to live back this same life, which period would you choose to rerun?
Actually, there was never a dull moment in my life. I enjoyed every moment of it, along with my friends. And if you ask me whether I'm still enjoying this life, I'll say yes. But which portion of my life was most enjoyable, if you ask me?
Yes.
When many of my friends were alive. You see, like Shakti Chattopadhyay, Shyamol Gangopadhyay, Sandipan Chattopadhyay, many others.
Which years would they be?
Should be 1960s, 70s.
60s.
These are the golden age of our life.
I have some inkling of those times. I was very young, but I've seen you then, and you were really making merry at writing and sort of promoting literature and also enjoying life in the evenings with friends.
Yes. We didn't think ever that we will only write, only produce books, would not think about anything else. We wrote more or less every day, but we attended music festivals. We would go to see theaters. We would go to see the art festival, art shows. So we are interested in many creations, not only literature.
Living life properly.
Living life properly and what the civilization has to offer us.
I would like to remind you, because you said about the 60s and 70s, Allen Ginsberg was taken aback by the quality of your life, which he had seen in the early 60s. It describes, in those days, Sunil Ganguly worked in 2 newspaper jobs to help support his family. He met his big gang of friend poets in an upstairs coffee house across the tramcar bookstall street from Calcutta University on Monday nights. They argued with friendly Marxist poets. They fixed up dozens of little magazines. They went on to country liquor shops, rice wines, and got plastered. After the trams stop at midnight, they walked home half of the length of Calcutta through dark, foggy streets.
Yes.
Is this a better time, or you still
Well,
prefer?
that was a better time for not only in our life but also for Calcutta and West Bengal.
Right.
We could walk through all the night in all the streets. We were not afraid to do that. Now I think it is not possible. After midnight you can't walk the streets. And we had friendly policemen. They would not take us to local police stations. We had exchanged our views with policemen, and Shakti, my friend, used to teach Rabindra Sangeet to a policeman also. And Allen Ginsberg, he was something of a real stranger in this city, being a Sahib, see, white-skinned man. But he used to wear pajama and kurta and wearing sandals, sometimes barefoot, and walk all night with us. We spent hours together near the Ganges, near Ganga, near Nimtala Ghat, Kashimitra Ghat, where many sadhus used to sit. And Alan would like very much to talk to the sadhus. But there was a language problem. The sadhus don't understand English and Alan doesn't understand Hindi. So sometimes I was the interpreter. Alan wanted to know what kind of life the sadhus seek. what they want, what is the idea of the afterlife or the cosmic existence. I was not very much interested in these subjects. I am a non-believer. I have no God and I don't believe in afterlife. But I was also curious to see Allen Ginsberg's genuine interest about this kind of question.
And when you went to the US and met Ginsberg in his own social milieu, was he the same type? Was he still the bohemian and the beatnik that he was?
Yes. You see, I met him several times in the US, also twice in India. So he was changing in his later life. He was changing. First, when I met him in Calcutta, and subsequently when only next year I went to the US, and sometime I spent some weeks with him in his apartment. He was interested in Hindu religion and almost a disciple of Ramakrishna. There he practiced some Hindu rituals also, like doing yoga and other things. And he learned the song Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. He taught this song to his disciples, his younger poets there.
Yes.
And sometimes in the streets they used to sing Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Later on, the people of Krishna consciousness, ISKCON people, took up this song, you see. But Allen Ginsberg was the person to sing this song in the streets of America. In his later life, he turned to Buddhism. When I met him again after a decade in his house, I saw that the Hindu idols were removed and he was also practicing Buddhism in some way which I couldn't understand. What was the Buddhist way of meditation? I don't know, but that was his ear. He said he became a non-believer of God, but he believes in other life.
When you went to the US for the first time, you had known Ginsberg before.
Yeah.
Did you get to meet Ferlinghetti and Corso also, his friends?
Oh, of course, many times. Ferlinghetti lives in West Coast.
Yes.
He runs a bookshop called
City Lights.
City Lights.
Yes.
And Allen and his friends mostly live in the East Coast. That means New York and New Jersey, those places. And I also met the legendary writer Kerouac, Jack Kerouac. His novel On the Road was a cult novel.
Trailblazing novel.
Trailblazing
Absolutely.
novel. Actually, Jack Kerouac gave me a tip about novel writing. Do you want to write novel some days? I was planning to write one, but I didn't write at that time. I said, but I don't know how to start a novel. I don't know how to build a plot. He said, don't you worry. This is very simple, he told me. You think that on 22nd January last year, what were you doing? Think it out. Tell me, what were you doing on 22nd January? I said, I don't exactly remember. Maybe I was standing in a railway station called Begumpur and I was drinking water from a tube well. Is that so? Start from there. No.
And that's Pratidwandi, no? Atmaprakash.
Start there. On that particular day, I was drinking water from a tube well. And then what did you do? You took a bus or you went somewhere? Just follow the trail.
Yes.
But you'll see. I said, that will be a travelogue, not a novel. Well, no. When you write, you'll find characters coming in. Characters barging in.
That's great. Absolutely. What is the earliest memory of your life? If you go back to your childhood, what is the first thing that you can remember?
You know, I took lysergic acid. What is the common name of that? LSD.
LSD, yes.
I took LSD. Both Shakti and I took
Yes.
LSD. And it is said that if you take LSD, you will remember your life. Jack Kerouac claimed that he took 4 LSD tablets at a time. And he remembered the period when he was in the womb of his mother. That was his claim. I don't know whether it is possible or not. After taking LSD, I didn't remember when I was in my mother's womb. But I remember things about when I was a boy of 2 or 3.
Yes. And what is the memory? I mean, can you figure out?
You see, sometimes memory is very tricky.
Yeah, it is.
You see, it's sometimes that people or your mother or your grandmother or somebody in the family repeatedly tell you a story, then after some years you may think that you have actually seen it, actually remember it. So this may be the case. At the age of 2.5, a snake in my village house, a snake was entering in the house. I saw it. I had a small knife in my hand and I cut it into two. This story was continued in my family for many years. And I was so brave. So I was
This is at your maternal uncle's place?
It is my father's
place.
Also, but it may not be true actually.
And do you remember your father in those days, in those earlier days?
Not when I was 2 or 3, but...
No. I mean, what he was doing then?
My grandfather was a Pandit in a village school called Toll.
Right.
They are old-fashioned Brahmin family. So it is a poor family. It was very difficult for us to make two ends meet. But my grandfather always remained in that village. My father came to Calcutta for his higher studies, and there he got a job in a school. So he was a school teacher in Calcutta. It was a better position.
From which year was that?
Before my birth.
Before your birth. So if you met your father at home in Faridpur, it was when he went back from his...
he was coming and going.
For his holidays. Yeah.
And so it was a better position that my grandfather, that he is a school teacher in Calcutta.
Right.
But the school teachers in a private schools were very poorly paid at that time. And not always they are paid every month.
Have you been to school in Faridpur?
Yes, I went to the called Pathshala for a year or so.
And when you migrated to...
No, not migrated. Much before partition, as I was born in 1934.
Yes.
So much before the partition, our family came to Calcutta because my father was teaching there.
Which year was that?
It was in 1936 or 37.
Achha.
And then I have vague memories of this Second World War period, where I was in Calcutta. And I had the distinct memory of Calcutta killings, Calcutta riots in 1946. And also I remember seeing ghosts in the streets. That means in 1943, people died on the street. Nobody cared to remove the dead bodies. And they were rising after 3, 4 or 5 days. Rigor mortis takes place. And these dead bodies, they rise like this. So as children, we were scared to look at them because we thought they have become ghosts. So I have memories, very, very bad memories of those days. Calcutta killing. And also it suffered. In 1943, there was the Great Famine also. Rice was not available. And even if you have money, you couldn't buy rice in open market. In black market, it was very much costly.
Since we've come to this point, your series of poems, Sriti Shohor, City of Memories, are they basically a tribute to those memories?
Yes. Actually, it is glimpses of my boyhood written in poetry.
Right.
Not writing in prose. I prefer to write them.
You were then living with your family in North Calcutta.
Yes.
And then in the last 40 years of your life, so the last 40 years, may it continue, you are a Southern Calcuttan.
Yeah.
Which life do you remember most when you come to...
So I know both the parts of this big city, the northern part and southern part. And as I lived my growing period, my boyhood days,
your adolescence
and adolescence, so I have vivid memories of North Calcutta life. When I migrated to South Calcutta, I didn't go out to find all the lanes and by-lanes of South Calcutta. But in North Calcutta, I knew every nooks and corners.
Yes. You grew up with the streets.
With the street. True. I used to walk all the time.
Right.
Unless you walk, you don't know the place.
True, absolutely. And then childhood memories are wonderful, absolutely. And they are also, like a favorite author of mine says, they are also visited by creativity. Because you also create your memories in a subtle way, which you don't know even yourself. And then it really makes another kind of reality.
Most of our creativity comes from our
boyhood sensations.
Boyhood sensations. Actually, it is from the age of 9 or 10.
True, absolutely.
And about 21, 22. That is the really stock place for your subjects.
Creativity.
Creativity.
That's true. That's true. So in a way, that your two major works, in fact rather three I would say, Those Days and East West and First Light, they also in a certain way talk of Kolkata, of the past, but also of the north.
Yes. And not so past. At least up to 1950s or 60s, there was remnants of the 19th century Calcutta's glorious period.
True.
I saw the dancing floors. I saw the real babus traveling in
Fitons.
So they are lost.
With walking sticks and
big
mustaches. Yes.
Now they are vanished.
Now I'll come to a point before we go to other questions. This is very central to my understanding of your work. Since you just mentioned that you grew up facing poverty, I mean, is it a reason why the article called Rice occurs so variously and so ubiquitously in your short stories, in your novels?
Yes.
Like I can think about so many of your stories. Mohaprithibi, there's a lot of talk about rice, though eventually the girl is seduced by alu chop, which is a potato chop. And then Polatoko Onushorankari, the chasers and the chased, it also talks about rice, because he comes down to eat, he takes muri, which is another form of rice, and puffed rice, and then he hasn't eaten rice for such a long time. And one of the chasers, they also talk among themselves that after they catch him or maybe do away with him, he'll go back home to have hot rice, warm rice with boiled potato and dal or lentil.
You are dreaming there.
You're dreaming it. And then there's so many of your stories.
And
Garam Bhato Shotti Bhuter Kahini. I mean, that's actually a tribute to rice. I mean,
yeah, because maybe it is subconsciously, it appears several times.
Yes.
Because I saw people suffering, not having rice for days after days. I suffered also when during 1943, my father sent us to the village where we are born, because in Calcutta it was very difficult to live because the schools were closed, because the Japanese dropped few bombs, so people were evacuating, schools were closed, many offices were closed. And private schools, if they are closed, the teachers don't get anything at all. Right. So my father couldn't manage to help us, so he sent us to the village, home. There also, rice was not available at all, except in the black market, because the British government thought that the Japanese would come from that portion, from Burma to Assam and then to East Bengal. The Japanese will come down. And so the Japanese, being rice eaters, if they don't get rice, they will suffer. So that's why all the rice produced in East Bengal were seized by the government without thinking what the common people will eat.
Right.
So we were there without rice for days after days. But how we suffered, how we survived, because somehow potatoes were available. I don't know whether Japanese people want potatoes or not, they eat potatoes or not, but plenty of potatoes are available. But we are not habituated to have potato in the morning or in the night, days after days, but that was only way to survive. Now I was again joined a school, and even we used to take boiled potatoes in our pockets and went to school, and after 1 hour or two we used to take potatoes from our pocket and eat. Days after days. And very few boys, they boasted about having rice. They're rich boys. They said, have you taken rice today? No? We took rice. So we used to be very jealous about them. And we were dreamed about the hot rice they are having in their home. So that impression was with me, that whatever a man or a woman doesn't get, but he should get twice some boiled rice every day, at least twice.
True.
So it is within me.
Actually, when I was thinking about your passion for describing or alluding to rice, I was thinking about another poet, a very great poet, Seamus Heaney.
Seamus Heaney,
Yes, he talks about continuously in his poetry about potato, because the potato was a crisis
That was
in Ireland.
In Ireland, that was the...
Yes. So
During the potato famine, the Irish people migrated to America.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
Yes.
That's true.
We never think potato as a basic food. You see, you always think it's as a vegetable or something like that. But in other countries, in many countries, potato is also the staple food. But
Is it one reason why, though you have tasted food from all over the world and you are still being sort of feted banquets here, there, and everywhere, you still have a little passion for the little white thing called rice?
Yes, it's true. When I go to abroad and spend weeks without rice, I feel really hungry. This means spiritual hunger.
That's great. That's great. I'll take 2 minutes of your time now for a brief description of your maternal uncle's place and your father's place in Maijpara.
Yeah. My father's place was a very poor family's home. It was a mud house, tin roof, and very few yards of land around. And it's just a small matter. At that time, there was a joke that all people who are migrating from East Bengal after Pakistan, they're landlords or jamindars. So our family wasn't landlords or jamindars. They are really, really poor people. But my maternal uncle's house was different. They were not only well-to-do, wealthy people, but they're also well-educated. One of my maternal uncle was, at that time, he was a DSc PRS. DSc, Doctorate in Science, and PRS was some
Prem Chandra Scholarship.
Scholar.
Yes.
And he was the head of the department of Calcutta University's mathematics department for a long time. And other brothers of my uncle, they are also fairly literate people. So I spent half of the time to the rich maternal uncle's place, half of the time to my poor grandfather's place. So I have the fortune of having the experience of a very poor family, living in a poor family, and living in a wealthy family.
But you somehow, I don't know how you acquired this, I've seen it from close quarters, that you are equally sort of at home, very in straitened areas and also in very lavish areas. Like one thing I'll put to you, maybe you can sort of clarify. Now you are one of the sort of most well-to-do authors in any language in India, but somehow that's a great thing. I mean, something I suppose reminds me of Vivekananda, and that is you carry your wealth with a certain embarrassment. You also feel a little ashamed at times that it might be of some distraction. Is it true?
I can only say this, that I never forget that I belong to a poor family. And I never forget those days. I have no bitterness, no bitter memory of those days. Rather, I would enjoy. I remember the day when I had only one shirt. And during the Holi festival, I couldn't get out of the house because of if the shirt is spoiled, I couldn't go to school next day. But now I make fun about this memory. When I tell this story to my wife or other friends, I said, oh, how I enjoyed it, how enjoyable it is. So it doesn't matter whether I am in...
Is it one reason why you give so much to others?
All people should do this.
No, I mean, is it one reason why you do it? Because you always know that some people are needed more than maybe you do.
Of course, in these countries, there are always many, many people who needed more than us.
Yes, because in a Playboy interview, Jean-Paul Sartre had said something interesting. He said, whatever I get as royalty or revenue from all my work, I pass it on to others because I want them to be possessed with it rather than me being possessed with it to keep myself free.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, but Sartre was not married.
Yes, yes, true. Okay, now this will have to be a long question. So, going by the descriptions of places and people in many of your novels, and by the voices and sentiments of many of your protagonists, it all seems like rising out of your life, times, and memories. In other words, Sunil is almost ubiquitous, ever present, and very much there in his novels, however various, different, and subject wise far removed they be from one another. It nearly reminds me of Albert Camus, among many others, who seems incessant to be writing of himself, his time, and his values. I wouldn't call these works simply autobiographical because that's a very lame and lazy way of description and a bit too vague. I would like to coin a few terms for them like magic reporting, memory game, strategic eyewitnessing, or why not, defacting.
You are right, but it is not only right about my prose, but it is true about my poems also.
True.
Almost 90% of my poems are written in first person. And so I tried to reveal myself through my poems. And as you gave many names to that kind of writing, there is another name I put that is at that time was called the confessional poetry.
Yes.
As if I am confessing my life to somebody else.
True.
And in prose also, especially in the first half of my career, I wrote mostly about my experience, and the protagonist's name is Sunil. He may be involved in drinking or gambling or spending nights at the brothels, but he is still Sunil. Many of it is truthful. But after few years I realized my own life or experience is not inexhaustible. Yeah,
True, absolutely, yes.
So I tried to write something based on history, where Sunil is not present, based on history. And it is not written in first person. But still, there is my reflection in it also. When I am writing history, if I don't interpret it in my own way, then why should I write history?
In fact, I have a suspicion, I don't know, you might be able to correct me. I see a lot of you in your protagonist in Sheishomoy.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm wrong, but I think because later on, immediately after you finished the novel, you spoke to me once about translating Mahabharata into modern Bengali. And I thought it was a kind of a continuation of that process. Your involvement with Mahabharata, like your protagonists, and then coming out of it.
Maybe subconsciously it comes like that.
Yes.
And
I see a little bit of you, I may be very wrong, you can correct me, a little bit of you in the Tagore you have planted in First Light.
Yes, sometimes it has to be.
Yes.
But I tried to, in the conversation, in the dialogue,
Yes.
I tried to be as faithful as possible.
Yes.
From Tagore's letters.
Yes, I know that.
And
of
diaries.
Course. That's beside the point. I mean, that is there, very much there. It's totally well researched. I've gone through the pages and looked at other texts and knew it's all from there. But even then, like I'll tell you why, now it's a situation where you really have to speak your mind because it's all archival material. I also see a bit of your admiration, I would even say, your passion for Vivekananda. The way you've written him in your work, I think there's a lot, not merely adoration or admiration, there's also a little bit of, self-extension into his...
I think that Vivekananda is a neglected person. You may wonder, because there is so much temples and so much writings about Vivekananda.
True.
But real Vivekananda is absent. The man, his passion, his thinking process is absent.
Yes.
We adore him, but
the modern man that he was.
I wanted to write a biography of Vivekananda,
Yes.
but couldn't get what should I say? Am I afraid to write it? I don't know.
No, why? Because you've been able to write so many things about so many heroes of Bengali culture.
Yeah. But it is such an icon that you have to write what people want you to write. That's what's being written about Vivekananda these days. But if you write something else,
Yes.
will they allow me to write it? I have this kind of
Duality going inside.
Duality going inside, that's true. That's why I couldn't help myself.
No, but I can see it because as I go through those texts at times, I can see the amount of
I have real liking for Vivekananda. I wanted to represent him as a real man, a genius, not only what he did for our religion, the revival of our religion, but his talent, I think, in many other fields are unknown, are not known well.
Acha, before we go to something else about your books, may I ask you a question? Can you name 5 Bengalis you think are the most important in our lives or in your life?
Vidyasagar, Rabindranath Thakur, 5 persons. Vidyasagar, Rabindranath Thakur, Subhash Bose, Jagadish Chandra Bose, and Sister Nivedita.
Would you call her Bengali?
Bengali,
And not Vivekananda?
Vivekananda Ramakrishna I keep aside.
You
I keep aside.
Do you have memories of movement as refugees from East Bengal to Calcutta? Because you've spoken about in the diaspora story that you wrote.
Yes, I have met many of them who came as refugees crossing the border, coming by foot. But I myself did not do it. As I said that we were here much before the partition.
Maybe your relations came.
Our relations came, our uncles, aunts, they came. Because I visited after many years, many years, after 55 years, I visited the same place where my paternal house was. That was a cluster of houses of the Brahmins, you see, called Brahmin Para. No houses, in fact, remain there now. All the houses are destroyed. So all the people, they migrated to West Bengal. They were not killed, as I heard from there. There were not much riot, but threat. So they had to leave. But though I have not seen them crossing the border on foot, but I have seen them living in horrid condition after coming to this place. I had an uncle who was such a forceful man when he was in his house. He killed a tiger. In fact, a sort of a mixture of tiger and cat, maybe, they call it. Sometimes Sundarbans was not far from there. There were stray cats or tigers there. So my uncle was such a strong man with not a sword, but a spear. He killed that tiger. And he was a sort of a jamindar, my maternal uncle, one of them. He was a jamindar. He used to give alms to poor people. He used to give help to the people who cannot go to school for money or that. Very important man. I saw him living in a basti in Bulgaria. And the man who used to speak, he used to roar. Now he speaks in a very thin voice. He has become sort of a wet cat, like a wet cat we say in Bengali.
Yes.
He's a wet cat. So this transformation is very tragic. That a strong, powerful man, he had to leave his house. He is now staying in this part of this Bengal and somehow surviving with his family. But he has transformed into nobody. That is the tragedy. This kind of thing I've seen.
This is what you call not merely physical, also spiritual displacement.
Yes, that is more important actually.
Is your novel Purva Paschim or East-West a tribute and response to that biggest exodus in human history, the 1947 partition of India?
Oh yes. Many books are written about the partition of Punjab. Well,
yes.
You see, there are many tragedies are written there. But people say that in Bengal and Bengali literature, very few books are written on this subject. I understand why not many writers are interested to write.
Why?
Because if you have to tell the truth or the true reason or what really happened after
communal
partition,
disturbance.
there could be communal disturbances. There is a risk of communal disturbances.
Right.
That's why people
Why doesn't it happen for Punjab?
Because the Punjab, the exchange was complete.
Yes.
Hindus and Muslims, the exchange was complete.
Total bifurcation.
There would not be a riot in Pakistan because there is no Hindus exist there.
True. Sunil, you are now, by middle-class Bengali standards, an extremely well-off person. But your attitude, sentiments, passions and concerns speak volumes of your obsession with poverty, especially poverty of the middle and lower middle class, where poverty is also a factor of shame. To you personally and your works of creativity, is this a moral question, a problem of morality, this shame factor?
Actually, you say I'm very well off. Only about 15 or 20 years ago, I could not pay my income tax. The bank account was nothing in the bank. And so only very recently, my books are sold and I got few awards. So I am not wealthy, but I am more or less upper middle class. I still don't own a car. It's given by the office. But I can afford to have a car. Anyway, so I remember more of the days when I was always in need of money,
Yes.
when I had to borrow money. So I remember more, because most of the period of my life was that. If it is 74 years, then only 15 or 16 years I am not asking money from anybody. but almost 55 years I had to suffer.
Yes.
So that period I remember more, and I feel sympathy for those people of that.
And in your works, when you deal with the middle class and the lower middle class, this poverty comes as a shame factor, which I noticed.
Yes, sure.
And you give it almost a kind of a very sort of impassioned plea to the public that this be not forgotten.
Yes.
When you finish the story, it's almost a kind of an appeal to the public senses, to the reader's senses, that this be not forgotten.
Yes, you are right.
And crossing the borders, your family located itself in Calcutta in the north. We just came round this question. Like after 40 years, you are still, being in the south, you are still very much a man of the north, Calcutta.
Yes.
Spiritually, culturally, I would even say, because you still hold those values in great esteem, which made you suffer and still tide over those suffering. There is a fine story about how you got to write your first poem, being forced by your father to translate from Tennyson as part of home task. Shall we know about it?
Yes, yes. It is, I have written it many times. Yes, my father, when my final exams were over, matriculation, at that time it was called matriculation. Now it is called higher secondary. So after the final exams, you have 3 months period before the results come out. So these 3 months, what do you do? At that time, there was no joint or any other kind of examination.
Comparative.
So you have to enjoy those 3 months. And my father thought, in those 3 months, young boys get spoilt. And the noons are the period when nobody could watch them, so I should be in the house compulsorily. I must not go out before 4:30 or 5. So whole noon be a prisoner in my house. And what kind of a prisoner? The prisoner should have some suffering also. So my father asked me to translate from Tennyson's poems, so that I will translate Tennyson's poem, I will be tied down, and also by translating Tennyson I will learn English. That my father said that 2 poems must be translated every day. So it was so hard for me. You see, all my friends are going outside, going to the movie house, they're learning how to smoke bidi and other things, and I was and I cursed Tennyson like anything. Why a poet like Tennyson was born? But faithfully I translated 2 poems every day. Then after 7 or 8 days I realized that my father, after taking a nap, he used to compare my translation and the original poem. But he only saw the size of the poems. 16 lines of Tennyson's poems, my 16 lines. He said, okay, next 2 poems, tomorrow, next 2 poems. So I realized that my father never compares line to line. So why should I bother to translate line to line poems? I can write any poem and say this is the translation. So I decided to cheat him. The title remaining the same, the 16 lines of Tennyson's poems, and in the same title I wrote a poem of mine. No translation, but it looks like a translation. My father would say, okay. Then there is one poem of Tennyson called A Letter. So I wrote a letter. I have to write a letter. So I wrote a letter to a girlfriend, my newly found girlfriend.
Yes.
A whole letter. Then after I fell in love with the letter, not with the girlfriend, I thought, it's not bad. So whether it is really a poem or not, how can I test it? Who will tell me?
Yes.
But I was afraid to show it to anybody else.
You were 17 then.
I was 16.
16.
I wrote this poem and sent it to Desh magazine. It's called Ekti Chiti. And wonder of wonders, after a few months I received an envelope like this, and inside the Desh magazine. And my poem was printed there. See? And then I thought that this girl, whom I dedicated this poem, whom this poem is really addressed, she used to read poems more than me. She could recite the poems of Tagore one after another, which I didn't know. Then I went to house and I wanted to know what's happening. Then the girl said, have you seen in these issues of Desh magazine, there is a poem. Somebody who has the same name of you, like you, wrote a poem there. She didn't believe that I can write a poem. So that was my first poem. And I forgot about it. Many years after that, only recently, one junior poet, Shavalkanti Das, he found out the poem.
Yes, from the Desh pages and got it printed also.
Yes, it was published in 1951.
Oh, goodness gracious.